Welcome you all to our workshop. This is a continuation of a conversation that we started about 2 years ago. That conversation happened on Zoom in November 2021. There's a lot of progress that has been made in terms of movement on research, on policy pieces since that conversation. I'm really excited to have you all here so that we can continue having those conversations and identifying sort of gaps in data. That was one of the big challenges that we had identified in that last get-together that we had. And besides that, I think we made some movement in terms of filling certain gaps in our regulatory challenges that the Environmental Protection Department faces in the province. I'm also really pleased to have Dr. Umar Masood with us, who heads he's the CEO of Urban Unit, and looking forward to seeing some of the work that the Urban Unit has done in this space. In fact, along with the EPD, in terms of evidence-based work and in terms of data-driven work, the Urban Unit really leads the pack as far as the government is concerned. So I shall, before starting the first session of the day, since I am the moderator, I'm going to leverage my moderator privileges to kind of discuss some of the research and policy work that we've done under the umbrella of the IGC and CDPR in the last few years. The sort of bigger the capstone projects that we've been involved in involve two big RCTs, randomized control trials in Lahore. I'll quickly summarize the first RCT that we conducted in 2019, and then my co-authors who are in the room, Shotaro and Isra, they'll have a chance to go through the second RCT that we've just concluded, and they'll go through that in the first session. So this RCT was focused on providing air pollution forecasts to low middle income residents in Lahore. We conducted this in 2019. This is work with Hasnan Fateh, Matthew Gibson. Hasnan Fateh is at Siwani, Matthew Gibson is at Williams College, Fatih Nadeem, who's a grad student at UC Santa Barbara, and Arman Rizai, who's at UC Davis. We provided and this was also conducted by Ideas, and we have Mohammed Malik with us right now, who actually led the data collection work for that. And he's actually led the data collection work for both of our RCTs. So we provided two treatments, basically day-ahead forecasts, PM 2.0 forecasts, and we did an in-person training to improve respondents' air pollution forecasting skills. And this was done with roughly 1,000 households in a low middle income neighborhood of Lahore. And here are the headline results. So what we discover is that providing people air pollution information when people don't have access to that sort of information actually raises the demand for that information considerably. So people are willing to pay almost 60% of the cost of 4G internet services to continue receiving air pollution forecasts, air pollution information. So they exhibit a very high willingness to pay for this information. As a result, what we can conclude is that residents of developing country, or urbanites or residents of developing country cities have considerable demand for air pollution information, and there is a lot of policy scope for filling up this gap. The other headline results, well, they're sort of captured in this table, but I'll summarize them for you really quickly. What we discover is that providing air pollution information and getting people to become better forecasters actually increases their avoidance behavior. So people who receive air pollution forecasts, air pollution information, and become better at forecasting air pollution, they exhibit a higher willingness to pay for particular filtering masks. So they want to protect themselves against the harmful effects of air pollution. Not only that, the same respondents, treated respondents, their alignment of outdoor time conforms with actual pollution levels. So people who who figure out that it's going to be incredibly polluted the next day are also spending few hours outdoors compared to indoors. And people who think that it's going to be the air is going to be relatively cleaner the next day are spending more time outdoors versus indoors. So providing these treatments also aligns respondents' outdoor time with actual levels of air pollution. So this was the sort of mainstream study demonstrating different behavioral impacts of air pollution information and forecast training on respondents in a developing country context. Then there's a spin-off, which I mentioned earlier, that Shotaro and Isra are going to talk about later in the first session. And these comprise the two main sort of academic pieces that we've done in the last few years. Besides that, there's been a series of policy papers, starting with this work on brick kilns, where we demonstrated that zigzag kilns, which now have, so a lot of the kilns in the province have been converted to zigzags. They are clean, and they are cleaner compared to your traditional bull's trench kilns, but not necessarily clean. So I think there was this misconception in the country where people thought that the zigzag kilns actually tend to be clean, but we demonstrate that they are cleaner but not necessarily clean. So that by itself is not necessarily like, I mean, you will achieve certain marginal gains in reducing PM 2.5, but really that's not where we should be setting our eyes in the long run, at least. Then there was another paper that one of my co-authors, Amna, who will be here soon, if she's not already here, is going to present on sort of summarizing the regulatory challenges that the Environmental Protection Department in Punjab faces. And she's essentially going to argue that Punjab, or generally in Pakistan, we have strong rules and regulations on paper, but these rules and regulations operate within a weak institutional setting. So once rules and regulations operate within a weak institutional settings, we don't achieve a lot of the outcomes that we're focused on. So she's going to kind of go through sort of the history of environmental legislation in Pakistan and identify where we sort of see those implementation challenges and gaps around monitoring and enforcement. And then last year, we did a series of papers discussing some of the non-health impacts of air pollution. So we have a lot of evidence now on the direct effects, on the direct health effects of exposure to harmful air pollutants. But now there's increasing evidence on the non-health effects, and this basically concerns cognitive impacts of exposure to pollutants like PM 2.5. So the residents of developing cities who tend to experience really massive levels of air pollutants, they also then end up with these experiences, these cognitive effects, where there's evidence of brain stunting, where students perform really poorly on exams on polluted days, where people make poor decisions when they're exposed to harmful levels of air pollution. So all of these costs really add up. So if you recognize these non-health effects, and then compare them or sort of juxtapose them against the direct health effects, then the problem is actually pretty severe. So we did these bunch of policy papers looking at the effect of summarizing sort of these non-health impacts and then contextualize them in the context of Pakistan and Lahore in particular. All right, so that's a quick sort of summary of the academic and policy work that we've done in the last few years. And now I'll introduce the first session of the day, which is on data and data on air quality and on pollution. Some of the driving questions, or some of the questions that we're going to be concerned with in this session, are on the types and sources of pollution. I think Umar Saab here is going to talk about the source apportionment study that the urban unit has recently conducted. So issues around, what are the sources of pollution? What are the contribution to air quality? How do we really measure air pollution? What are the challenges in collecting spatial and temporal data? And then how do we address the sort of mistrust around air quality data in Punjab? So if you're getting information from various sources, public versus private, how do residents of developing cities compare and contrast that data, and how do they form expectations and beliefs around that data. And in fact, Shutara and Isra are going to perhaps discuss that in the context of the RCT that we collectively did last year. And finally, how do we really understand citizens' beliefs over air pollution? And if they have misplaced beliefs over air pollution, what are the sort of interventions that we can engage in to kind of address those, that mistrust and those beliefs? I shall now open the first session. The first speaker is Dr. Umar Masood. He is the CEO of Urban Unit. He's been a great friend to the IGC and CDPR, and this is the first time I've met him, but I have a lot of colleagues who have extensively worked with him in the past. So Masood Saab, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here so early in the morning. So, this is not the best time for performing as far as I am concerned, but still. My name is Umar Masood. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Urban Unit. Thank you. So, this session is about data and our reaction to data as far as environment is concerned. And while I confess that I lead the urban unit, we at the urban unit have been very shy about sharing data ourselves. Because when you throw data about the environment or about climate change, it provokes a reaction within the government which we really cannot anticipate. Whether they would actually trust the data or whether they would become even more skeptical than before. So, this is a very strategic choice that we have to make, and I admit to that sometimes we hold back on data. We have the data and we think that it makes sense. There is an internal discussion, and obviously then we look at the dynamics within the government, that how it would be perceived. Would it show underperformance of the EPD, or would it show their success somewhere? So we start thinking in terms of departments and how they would actually react to it. And obviously, this entire thrust of dealing with environment challenges in a much more coordinated fashion, the transparency and the idea of sharing data becomes much more strategic to us. And I don't think so. I would not advocate an approach in which we just open ourselves to data and embrace everything, because usually in the government we are not sitting in an environment like we are sitting right now over here. I actually believe that when this presentation is over, there is going to be certain reactions to the numbers. Some people would doubt them and some people would advise a better approach. But if it were a government setting and we were to show this, that creates a much more severe reaction, because, there is a path dependency. As far as departments are concerned, they are approaching a particular problem in such a way. And the urban unit is very careful and very wary of the fact that we should rock the boat, but we should not rock the boat so that it capsizes entirely and the entire thing, falls flat. Having said that, and I'm going to speak at length, so if I cross my limit, and I always usually do, I'll take the privilege of being the first speaker at 9:30 in the morning. So you need to grant me an extra 20 minutes. Having said that, I was in Washington, good offices of IGC, to participate in a conference, and the floods had recently occurred. And other than the conference, when people used to approach me, they used to ask me, what are you doing about it? So I did not have an answer. So the world has moved ahead and we are still discussing it very symptomatically. So I would show you this picture of Lahore on a clear day and the same main boulevard on a day of smog. So this is a very symptomatic representation of air quality in Lahore. But I think we need to move this discussion forward and this conversation forward in talking about evidence and data. And I think the urban unit really needs to play a role of being at the vanguard of this thing, although that's a riskier strategy for us because we cannot know how departments would actually react to it and whether any data that we would show would be contested. If it is contested in a positive way, we can evolve into a better model. If it contested in a negative way, I think there would be ramifications for it. So having said this, let's go to the first slide. Okay. So this is a consistent performance by Lahore city ranking. So if you see in 2018 to 2022, we've moved up the ladder. I think we are not very proud of it, but this is what the world is actually seeing. So last 5 years have not been very good as far as air quality ranking is concerned. We are 176 on the environmental performance index, and you can see that from top 10 we have moved into almost top 5. Next slide. Let's talk about data. Well, our objective is reliable data, but I think our emphasis right now is on data, just data, and the reliability aspect is under discussion at the moment. But if we look at the government level, if you look at the right hand side of this slide, so we have 5. I mean, this is our army of what we can call our strength, or what I see on the ground, and people might have a different view about it. 5 air quality monitoring stations, 2 are functional, some are non-functional. Under the Punjab Green Development Program, there will be 9 more which will be installed in districts of Lahore or Lahore division. Urban unit has 1. Urban unit has got 2 mobile sensors. So this is our air quality force, as we can say. But right at the bottom, the private data sources, we know that there are additional data sources, but there is recording of this data, but there is no collaboration. So we have not still evolved into some sort of an effective network of pooling our resources together, collaborating on, say, air quality data in Lahore and coming up with a single point of view or a single point of convergence. I've shown this slide a million times, and it has always a remarkable impact. So since 11th May 2021, this is our data station in Township Lahore, and this is what it is recording. We've hardly have any days, very few days, in which the air quality is under 50. Most of it is above 50. So if you look at the next slide, that would really tell you. We have had just 1% good air quality days since May 11th, 2021, as per our data reporting. 8% are within the range, but look at unhealthy and unhealthy for sensitive group. So 53% of the days since May 11, 2021 are unhealthy for the citizens of Lahore. So if you want to see it in real numbers, that is 147 plus 240. So you've had a year, more than a year of poor air quality in Lahore since 11th May 2021. So, this is sort of striking. Key challenges. Again, this has been shown again and again. It always provokes all types of reaction. Lahore has been fast losing its green vegetation cover, both tree and agriculture area. So if you look at the satellite imagery right at the bottom, from 1990 to 2017, this is how Lahore has expanded. So our built up area has gone up by 34.7%. but because most of it is low density, our vegetation cover has really decreased. It has gone down by 87%. And that is really serious. Now, here the entire domain of urban planning and environment really have to interface very well together. But we are not interfacing very well together when urban planning comes to the environment. What do we have as far as the future is looking? So these are the cities and towns in 2017. And if we look at population growth numbers, these cities will become larger and these towns will become intermediate cities. So this problem will not be limited to Lahore. And if you can see that cluster of cities or that necklace of cities which are sort of sprouting up in and around Lahore and Gujranwala, this is going to be your biggest hotspot as far as air quality is concerned going into the future, because this is what we are projecting in terms of urban population growth in 2047. So most of the young people over here, it's more a message for them rather than for myself. I did not contribute to it. So, I enjoyed a youth in which Lahore had, blue skies and we used to be out most of the time. But I don't know what's going to happen to the next generation of younger Lahore citizens. One thing that we've been, clearly noticing, and the numbers really show, is the increase in vehicular traffic. The number of motorcycles in the last decade have increased by 263%. These are the registered motorcycles in Lahore. Three-wheelers have gone up by 212%. Public transport share, both private and public transport, both private mass transit and public mass transit is less than 1%. And we have got 6.3 million vehicles in total in Lahore. And obviously power generation is also a major factor as far as greenhouse gas emission is concerned, but these are overall numbers, not Lahore specific, if I'm actually correct. But the right side, these are the numbers for Lahore. Industrial emissions is also a challenge. We have talked about brick kilns, but there are other industries. And the problem over there, again, it comes to urban planning. Only 10% of the industries are situated in what you can call industrial estates or properly planned places for the industries to locate. Most of our industries follow the pattern of ribbon development. So they are along roadsides or major arterial routes. And they use waste or substandard fuels, or substandard material as fuels. So like old tires, paper and wood to run some of their units. And very few, and really indeed very few industrial units have installed pollution control devices. Hassan, what was the number that you were sharing? 350. So the grand total is about 5,417. And this again is a bit of, this data is a bit dated, it's 2018. But our count really shows that out of that, about 300 plus have just installed any type of air pollution control devices. Next slide. We've been talking about crop burning, and I think most of you are familiar with this image. Some of it is happening within Pakistan, but most of it is on the eastern part of our border in India. And this is the comparison. So on the left-hand side, the smaller bars are representing basically the Punjab in Pakistan, and on the right-hand side, the larger or the taller bars are actually showing the Indian states in the east, Punjab, Haryana, and Chandigarh. Well, Chandigarh is not a state, it's a city really. Another thing is our dump, our waste dump. That too is becoming a source of methane emission, and that is much more serious. So the old waste dump in Lahore is, at the moment 126 metric tons of methane in an hour, which is equivalent to 6,200 cars. So, these are the blind spots. We do not even talk about what's happening as far as solid waste is concerned and its effect on the air quality. Coming to the topic of my presentation, the sectoral emission inventory for Lahore and then Punjab. Uh, if you go into government circles here in Lahore, we relied on an FAO study in 2018 that was done for 11 districts. So that was not done for the city of Lahore, that was done for 11 districts in Punjab. And these were the numbers that they showed. They showed that, transport is contributing 44% as far as these emissions are concerned. 25% is for industry, agriculture is 20%, and power is 12%. But these numbers were for the 11 districts and not specifically for the city of Lahore. Then we were inspired by this study, which was done for Peshawar prior to the Lahore study, which really showed that in Peshawar, if you look at the city of Peshawar, transport is contributing 85.4% as compared to a much smaller share for industry and waste burning or any type of domestic emissions as far as air quality is concerned. And let's come to the Lahore pass. So, when I talk about methodology, and I'm not an environment expert, while I was at MIT, I made sure that I skipped all the environment classes. So I used to do the economics part of it, but not the environment classes, and I regret that once I actually landed up here as in the urban unit. I myself was very wary because I had to understand myself what they were up to, my team at the urban unit. So this is really the simplest of the simple analysis, and this can be improved further, and it can be made much more sophisticated. And basically what we used were secondary data sources. So we have the Punjab development statistics, there's the Pakistan Energy Yearbook, which shows the consumption of various fuels, and we have got the agriculture marketing information services as far as agriculture is concerned. And if you look at the IPCC tier 1 type of calculation, is basically you use the activity data and multiply it by an emission factor, and you can come up with an emission number. So really, I'm not showing you something very sophisticated. I'm showing you something what I can call a back of the envelope type of a calculation. And you simply use this as a proxy for activity data. So the activity data collection, you use the sources from secondary material. You use the emission factor, which have been actually provided by the IPCC guidelines and the EMEP, and then you simply multiply it and come up with these numbers. So in that sense, so far this exercise is very very simple. But then you can also use remote sensing data and other studies to sort of verify and cross-check these numbers. So I mean, this was the secondary material that we were using, and it's easily available. I think in the library at LUMS you would have all this. So Pakistan Energy Yearbook, Punjab Development Statistics. I was not aware of this methodology. To be honest, till February of this year, I was not aware of this methodology. There used to be a research associate who used to keep peeking in my office, and I thought that she was on the verge of resigning or handing her resignation letter, so I refused to meet her. But actually, she wanted to show me this methodology. So the 2 months delay was because of my I thought that she wanted to either resign or something. And finally, I asked her, you keep peeking in my office, I mean, is there an issue? And she said that I've done this study and I wanted to share it with you. Clever enough to actually explain to a CEO who has hardly any background in environment what she had done. And then I sort of, realized that these are the key pollutants. So you have all the oxides, you have the particulate, matter, and this study sort of captured all this. And this is the, summary of this. So working identically on the Peshawar model. So Peshawar had 88%, and I can understand why Peshawar has a slightly higher percentage, because traffic congestion in Peshawar is much higher. It has just like 3 or 4 arterial roads, and the entire traffic is concentrated on those roads. But here in Lahore, if you see, 83.15% is coming from transport. Now, why this thing is important? I believe that this is important because if you look at the FAO number, you would say that, this is transport may not be as important, but if you look at it at a city scale, we feel that transport is more important. Now, one can argue against it, or one can say that this needs a much more sophisticated analysis, or we may have missed certain points. But I think we at the urban unit finally felt that it's really important to come up with some type of data and evidence and throw it open, so that at least people are reacting to it or are talking about it, because we really want here at the urban unit, we want that data and evidence should be used in policy making, which is not being used so far. What we are actually relying upon is anecdotal evidence. I am not saying that that is a bad strategy, but I'm really saying that when you have a situation in which you have limited resources, then you really need to have good evidence so you can target better. So the bang for the buck is what I'm really talking about, is that if we have better evidence, perhaps we can target better. Perhaps it's time that the transport department start thinking about mass transit and environmentally friendly mass transit in a much more emphatic fashion than it is looking at it right now. Right now, we are stuck in the feasibility world, whether it is going to be financially viable or not. But we are not looking at the impact of the environmental impact if we do not address the transport issues in Lahore. So moving forward, if you look at the bare numbers, this is what transport is contributing. I think it's almost leading in everything. Carbon monoxide, which is the most dangerous of all, it is actually coming from transport, less from agriculture and waste burning. So these numbers are really, really huge. We might be wrong, but the difference is so big that we really feel that we have got something that requires a different approach as far as the urban landscape is concerned. So the emission inventory in Lahore is aligned with the sectoral emissions inventory in Punjab and Peshawar. Yes, it is. So at least we have one study which is sort of verifying what we have done in Lahore. So emissions in Lahore are mainly caused by the transport sector. I've dwelled upon that at length. What I've not dwelled upon is the third one. Targeted actions with respect to each sector are recommended to be developed and implemented. So if we go over here, let's not look at air quality as a collective. We need to break down air quality on the basis of the sources from which this thing is being sort of generated. And if you look at Lahore, I think transport is a sector that really needs to be looked at much more carefully, with much more government investment, and it has to be evidence-based. Moving forward, we thought that we need to do the same thing for Punjab. I'll not go over all these slides because I think I've taken more than my allotted time. But we are really now starting thinking of doing the same exercise that we did for Lahore, and we want to sort of project it over Punjab. So when we project it over Punjab using the gains model, the numbers then sort of start tying up with the FAO study. So then again you have 39%. So this is all 36 districts of Punjab. The FAO study was 11 districts of Punjab. It was saying 44% is coming from transport. And the Lahore sectoral emission, which is basically the city of Lahore, that is indicating that more than 80% is coming from transport. So if you look at the overall Punjab picture, the numbers start aligning more with the FAO study. But I again repeat, there is importance to disaggregate data And even if it is a back of the envelope, very simple type of a calculation, this type of data and simple analysis is really required now at the government level, so that they can actually allocate and design projects around this issue, which is not being done so far in a very coordinated manner. And I will end here with this, final slide. If you look at Punjab, 1990 to 2020, this is based on data from satellite imagery, secondary sources. So from 1990 to 2020, you can see what is the variation as far as air emissions is concerned, or air quality is concerned. Carbon monoxide is contributing a greater share as far as poor air quality is concerned, and that share has been increasing consistently. And overall, air quality is getting worse in Punjab than, say, in 1990. So if some of us remembers remember the 1990s, it used to be a very different Lahore at that time. And I think we are old enough to remember what was Lahore in 1990 and what is Lahore in, say, 2023. And if you look at this graph, you can actually tell that really something has shifted in a very fundamental way. And I think the entire city is going to change in a very fundamental way. People will get out less frequently. Commute will be much more vehicular based, and this whole idea of green spaces and livability and whatnot we have in urban planning, I just don't see, with this type of an environmental challenge, how can I actually align it with the ideals of urban planning. So as an urban planner, I think this is becoming a greater challenge for us than anything else. With that, I would conclude, and over to you, Sawal. Thank you.
Thank you, Umar Saab. It's great that you mentioned the FAO study, because for the longest time I remember, like, most of us who are in this space used to quote that FAO study, which is in fact conducted in 2015 and published in 2018. So that was actually pretty old data. And then that was the only sort of, so, well, I wouldn't necessarily call it source apportionment, because it was based on apparently remote sensing data, which technically doesn't count as source apportionment, but for the longest time was the only source of evidence on sectoral emissions and contribution to air quality. But I'm glad that we have another source at hand, which has much more recent evidence. All right, Nazish, you're next. Nazish Afraz is the program economist for SEED, and they've done extensive work in KPK on air quality. Nazish, so Umar Saab has eaten into your time, so be cognizant of that. So.
I'm just going to pass it forward to the next person to catch up that time.
Well, I'm going to start exercising my moderator privileges, so I'll have to cut you at some point. So just be.
That's all right. Okay. In fact, the study that Umar Saab referred to is the study that I'll be talking about, and I'll keep it short. I knew I didn't have the first mover advantage. So it's a super interesting study. It's available on our website, but I've just got a few graphics from it. Okay, I've got the... Okay, so in terms of what I'm going to talk about, there are two pieces of evidence and research that SEED commissioned. I should start with SEED is an FCDO-funded program for the government of KP. We've been working in this space for the last couple of years, and we're hoping to continue to do so for the life of the program. We started off with the status of air quality report, and Davar is the author of both of the reports. So I'm going to hand over very shortly to him. And we started with, that's the report that Umar Saab also quoted. We wanted to get an understanding of what is the level of air quality, what are the different kinds of pollutants, and what are the sources. So the source apportionment is something that Davar did very creatively actually for that region, because there wasn't the kind of data, and he used multiple sources of data to get at those figures. And the second piece is something that we're just wrapping up now, and it should be published, I think, in the next month or so. That's on building on the findings of the study and doing exactly that kind of sectoral level interventions that Umar Saab referred to on the basis of what we found. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about implementing the findings and what we have been doing on the ground in SEED, and some of the lessons that we've learned, because not everything was successful. I think we had a bit of stop-go, and some things we're still figuring out as we speak. So for the research part, I'm going to hand over to Davar, because he was the author of both the reports, and time bahut thoda tha, but really very, very interesting research, I think, for all of you to read for the future.
Thank you, Nazish. Thank you, Samuel. A lot of it, Umar Masood Saab actually covered the methodology part, so we don't need to spend time over it. But the idea behind the Peshawar study was largely, as Nazish said, that we did not have data sources, and it had to be done creatively, because in Punjab, sitting in Punjab, where we had seen the smog issue, beginning. I'm from Lahore. I've seen it like gradually getting worse since 2008 or 9. And in Lahore, we had the sort of benefit of having a lot of the numbers documented. So petroleum data, number of vehicles, number of industries, a lot of the activity rate was documented. In Peshawar, that was very, still beginning to happen. And I think since 2015, that's when the development statistics are becoming a lot more regular. Now, in the rest of the provinces, it's much worse at this point. Balochistan does not really publish any development statistics, so we have no numbers for Quetta or any other district. Sindh specifically is a very, very unique case, because from each year to next, the numbers in the development statistics, which is the government's official, publication, keep on going up and down. So in 1 year, you'll have 1 million vehicles. The next year, Karachi will show 5 lakh vehicles, and you're wondering what is happening to these numbers. So for Peshawar, we sort of started tabulating multiple sources, and a lot of back and forth had to be done with the sort of help of the private sector. So I remember when I was looking at vehicle numbers in Peshawar, I was constantly being pointed from the number one, the city traffic police, that the numbers that you're seeing are not the true numbers. The recorded number of rickshaws in Peshawar is 10,000, 15,000 in the statistics, but the traffic police keeps on saying that we know that in Peshawar there are a minimum of 1 lakh to 1,50,000, and unregistered from other districts, from the recent ex-FATA merger, a lot of vehicles coming in. And then, of course, there is the idea that because of a differential between excise duties, a lot of vehicles in Peshawar are now Islamabad registered. And Islamabad also does not publish those numbers publicly. So a lot of this had to be, the numbers had to come from, personal contacts, private sector data, particular vehicle manufacturing data. Now, Umar Saab just showed that particular graph for Lahore, that something happened in the year 2000, and then it shoots up. Recently, I was looking at a number, and this is from Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, that the manufacture of bicycles in Pakistan was around 1,50,000 per year in the year 2000. In year 2020, it's less than 20,000 bicycles per year. So that's you're thinking that how these numbers could act, but it's simply a figure of use of fossil fuels and what sort of activities you're conducting with those numbers. And simply, we had to, model a lot of this for Peshawar. Nazish, can you move to the next slide? So we first, to begin this study, we had to look at the activity rate, but while conducting field visits in Peshawar, this was continuously pointed out that Peshawar is it's a valley, so a lot of it comes from two different sides, depending on what's the season, and just gets stuck in Peshawar. It's similar for Lahore, but Lahore has a temperature inversion. Peshawar does not have an inversion, but it is a valley and has a similar structure where everything gets stuck. And after the ex-FATA merger with Peshawar, there's this huge alley of pollution generating industries, which is just situated Hayatabad and between Jamrud. And the issue is that the numbers for Jamrud side, again, are not in official statistics. So we had to actually ask one of the industrial state managers that if they have some numbers, and they give informal numbers that they've conducted some counts. These are not within their domain, they cannot regulate them, the EPA cannot regulate them, but they exist there. They produce a lot of paper and cardboard, so there's that sort of particulate matter from those industries which then flies into Peshawar at different times of the year. Waste burning numbers, of course, this was an issue because number one, Peshawar does not have an official proper landfill site, and a lot of it is being just burned around the city at different spots. So we just tabulated the total quantum of waste that is produced in Peshawar, and then based on a couple of research publications, we were able to sort of account for what eventually gets burnt. And KP is one of those provinces where a lot of the power gen completely comes from hydroelectric sources. So unlike Lahore, you do not have furnace oil power plants, you do not have large captive generation power plants in Peshawar, and the industry in most cases also burns a little bit of furnace oil and diesel. So most of the emissions in Peshawar are diesel related, not even furnace oil, not even very other big sources. There is 1/5 of the brick kilns that Lahore has would be operational in Peshawar, so you have that sort of coal. But interestingly, the Afghan coal that comes to KP is actually cleaner than the coal from Punjab and Sindh. So that's also that we do not know the exact amount of sulfur in the coal throughout the country to actually say something. There was a lot of hue and cry about the Sahiwal coal plant. The issue is that Sahiwal coal does not produce any particulate matter at all. It produces a lot of carbon dioxide, but no particulate matter at all. And that sort of conversation is pretty useless in this regard, because the coal that we have in small industrial units in Lahore is very dirty. Sahiwal is imported coal, so it's not dirty at all. And then, of course, the KP side, again, coal is relatively cleaner, so clean that a lot of the cement industry in Pakistan actually has shifted to Afghan coal in the northern region. So this was the overall numbers, and percentage-wise, when we calculated just the inventory, the transport numbers are far higher. But we then accounted for the dust component, because dust is a big issue in Peshawar, and even right now when we're seeing the map of Punjab, my own personal opinion is the next biggest polluted city in Punjab will be Multan and somewhere close to Jhang. Even though these are not big cities, but the dust component in these cities is huge. We have very little idea what's happening in these cities, no monitors, no inventory, but probably Multan, and then you'll have Rawalpindi and Islamabad. Those will be the worst off cities with what's happening over there right now. Very similar to Lahore's urban sprawl as well. So these are the numbers. Next slide, please. So this was an experiment that we conducted both on ground when we were doing the report, and then we scrapped a lot of Google Maps data for traffic congestion numbers. And the interesting fact was that if you are looking at real-time air quality rather than annual emissions or monthly emissions, the real-time air quality really follows the traffic congestion on that day. This was, I've done this analysis roughly for Mal Road in Lahore as well, but this was the GT Road in Peshawar, and luckily we had placed a monitor on one end, and then you had the US EPA monitor right in the middle, so you had two different sources really studying the trend on the GT Road. And what we saw on this particular week was that the air quality was following the morning peak and then the evening peak, depending on traffic congestion. And the difference you are seeing on in the Thursday sort of data was the Peshawar local government elections were starting on Thursday. So it sort of became a local holiday, and traffic numbers went down, and then you had air quality cleanup. If you look at the Friday numbers, there is a small peak that just goes down, and then there's a peak after the Jummah prayers. So it's that correlated that the movement of traffic based on Jummah prayers is actually also impacting your air quality, because Jummah prayers lead to congestion in certain parts of the town as well. So it was very correlated. We did not have even the crop burning issue, so Peshawar was just transport emissions, completely and that is why a lot of the work that we're going to do in the coming months is going to be targeting the transport and the dust component, because we see that if you target these two parts, this is the largest gains possible for any city in a small amount of time. Because my assumption right now for all of Pakistan is that it's going to get much worse before it gets better, especially for cities like Lahore and Karachi and Rawalpindi, because of the already sort of initiated projects, already committed projects, which are going to be completed in the next 5 to 6 years. The shift in the power sector, the shift in the transport sector is going to get a lot worse before it starts getting better. So we're already planning on those sort of, with that in mind, and going to target these two big sectors in advance, so that in the coming 2 to 3 years, the government in KP, the government Peshawar, has an idea that what needs to be done immediately for, quick solutions. This was again satellite imagery. NO2 hotspot follows the GT road again. The GT road crosses through Peshawar, and all of the big, dense amounts of NO2 are in Peshawar. So when we do source apportionment, what happens is that we actually underestimate the traffic emissions, because direct PM 2.5 or particulate emissions from transport isn't a lot. But what is a lot is NOx and the volatile organic compounds, which both under the action of the sunlight convert into particulate matter. While at the exhaust, they're not particulate matter, but right after they're like 5 to 10 minutes in the air, the reactions start and they start converting into particulate matter. So we need to also think of those chunks when we're conducting the source apportionments. NO2 is a very, very big polluter in Peshawar. Similarly, there are 3 different hotspots in Lahore actually, because one is in Gulberg, one is in Lahore Sheikhupara Road, one is in the Raiwan industrial areas. So a lot of it just comes in and mixes into the city. What we're seeing also in Peshawar right now is that as the city is expanding towards the south and north, it's used to be an oval, but it's growing into a circle now. So that it's following that sort of pattern that we see in other cities.
All right, Davar, the angel of death appears to
So
intervene.
I think we just cover, so vehicle registration already covered, we can move ahead. This is from the World Bank study. They sort of came together and recommended that airshed management is something that should be done. Airshed management is fairly simple to understand, that air quality does not follow any district boundaries, and we have to look at the geography of these areas. Now the Indo-Gangetic plain, which is basically between Jhelum and all the way till Bihar and even Bangladesh, that's the most polluted. You're seeing on the western side that how much dust actually comes into KP and Balochistan from the Iranian border, and a lot of this dust actually comes into Dera Ghazi Khan and Multan as well, and that's why it's going to be off the charts when you put a monitor over there. The Peshawar side is relatively lower dust, but a lot of localized emissions, and still wind patterns that carry those localized emissions and dust during the winter season. So that is a big concern for Peshawar. Peshawar does not have a component of crop burning coming into it. It has a lot of dust that comes from the southwestern and western side. This is again, we track the sort of trajectories for that air quality where the emissions are coming from. During the sort of monsoon months, or post-monsoon, you still have winds coming down from the southeast, which is still the pattern for what the monsoon winds follow. But during the winter, it's a lot of localized emissions. Just it gets emitted from Peshawar, goes a little bit away, and then comes back into Peshawar. So it's the valley effect that makes Peshawar a lot worse in that regard. Next one. This is just satellite imagery showing how even during the monsoon months, when there's a lot of more greenery, you still have a lot of dust, and during the winter it becomes completely dry, arid land west of Peshawar. That is just dust coming into Peshawar afterwards. So these are the policy recommendations. We have to expand monitoring. A lot of that has already been done in Peshawar. We are also, now trying to look into how to make the BRT more useful, and what can be done to solve the last mile issues for the BRT. And then the biggest chunk that I think we will be doing is a green mobility strategy in KP and Peshawar, which will be looking at non-motorized solutions, which will be looking at how to reduce emissions during peak hours, and what to do with the old vehicle fleet as well. How can that be replaced effectively? I think another slide of this, the recommendations existed, yeah. So we're also trying to enforce some advanced dust control measures. Some of those are already enforced for mining and quarrying in Pakistan, but a lot of that can be expanded to urban construction activities, which will reduce those sort of emissions. Urban afforestation, we are of the opinion that trees are not going to be of any use if we are not going to align them with our overall urban expanse sort of ideas. We suggest that the western side, which is very arid and dry, needs to be forested heavily. But within the city, you just need to reduce the cars at this point. Whatever cities that we look at, and when we study the sort of concretization of cities, we need to not think of how many trees have been removed, because trees, in a sense, can be planted anywhere else as well, and they will have the same CO2 removal impact. But we need to look at what came after those trees were removed. And there's no better example than sort of GT Road or Lahore's Canal Road, that when you add 2 lanes, you're removing the trees, but if you have the same amount of vehicles, you won't be producing more emissions. What has happened that adding those lanes has induced more demand and led to addition of vehicles that should have not have happened. So whenever we look at we constantly discuss this, it's not anymore a data issue, it's a lot of a political capital issue as well, because no one wants to retire old vehicles. That is one of the biggest things that we need to do if we want to have public transport actually excel in any part of the country or anywhere in the world as well, because no public transportation strategy succeeds until you retire old vehicles and then you impose any sort of vehicle limitation. I think that's about it. We had a couple of more slides. We did a prioritization matrix for what we want to do in Peshawar and what can be done in the short term based on time requirements and investments. This is what we have sort of selected so far. This is again that ranking. I think that's about it, right?
Cool, that's about it. The process that we've been following, we've been building on each piece of research to actually ensure that we're targeting, so together transport and dust is 75% of all emissions. So those are the 2 sectors that we are focusing on for our policy interventions, and within that as well, we are very aware of the fact that we can't propose something very expensive right now. So we're prioritizing the interventions. They have to be high impact and low cost and easy to operationalize. So that's the kind of thing that we're trying to show over here. I want to I'll just take a couple of minutes more just to talk about.
Ooh, Nazish, I thought we were like. We really gotta wrap it up.
We can pick it up later, I guess.
Yeah, maybe in the discussion we can pick it up. Like, how's that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, yeah. No, I mean, yeah, we have 2 more presentations and then we need to involve everybody else in a discussion too. So Shotaro, you're up. So Shotaro's going to discuss our field experiment, which we just recently wrapped up. So this was the second of the field experiments, looks at belief formation, how do people kind of like form beliefs over public versus private data. More of our work on avoidance and adaptation. And Shotaro is wrapping up his PhD at UC Davis and has already taken up a position at the American Trade Commission. So,
Federal Trade Commission, yeah. Hi everyone, thanks so much. This joint work with Samval Isra right here, along with a couple of other folks, and implemented by our own Mohammed. So again, we're going to focus a little specifically on air pollution information provision and sort of what we can do and the way in which people form beliefs around the information that we provide and form demand for such services. Even though sort of currently at the individual level air pollution or air quality information is underprovided to the general public, there's strong demand for this, and we've shown this in the previous work and we show it again in this work. The question is, right, government institutions are generally sort of the ones providing the information sort of as the sort of primary provider, but they face challenges in terms of reliability and dissemination. And as Omar Saab has mentioned, and folks like PAQI have done, there's NGOs and external agencies that provide the duplicate set of information. So what happens from the citizen's point of view is that they have choices over which information to sort of take on and then sort of form beliefs and preferences once they get access to it, right? And here's a graph that shows that there is variation between the sources in the actual levels that these sources provide. And this kind of creates an opportunity or the condition in which people may sort of form varying beliefs about the state of the world, as well as what to do about their daily lives and in response to the air pollution that they face. So we're studying how information sources may affect people's beliefs about air quality and form demand as a result. So we just confirm, first of all, that people have high demand for such services, and we ask, to what extent do they care about the source? Do they have differential willingness to pay for different sources? Do they sort of manifest their preferences for sources once they receive them? And prior to receiving them, do they have really strong preferences over different sources? And lastly, sort of how do they perceive the quality of the source that we provide? So what we do is that we provide an SMS-based air pollution forecast message. So this is not the actual reading per se, but we construct what we call an ensemble model, taking on different data bits from all the sources that are available, all major sources that are available for air quality readings in Lahore, and we construct a day-ahead forecast. And we provide that over SMS on people's phones. And our randomization is just two arms. One in which we tell people that this was this forecast was constructed using data from the government or EPD to be more specific. And in the other arm, we provide the exact same information, but we make salient the fact that we use data from PAQI. So this is what people would receive on a daily basis, and as you can see from left to right, that the only thing that's different is the source that we make sort of salient or make them pop out in the text messages. And for more detail about how we construct this forecast model and how we take data from different sources, please talk to us in our discussions or in other free time. And what we find is, first of all, that people have really high valuations for these measures, which is really reassuring in that this is not sort of esoteric services that we're providing. For 2 months service, people are willing to pay on average about 240 Pakistani rupees, which is quite high. And when we measure people's preferences for which source they like, so we gave people 100 rupees, then we asked them to donate between two sources. One is EPD and the other PAQI. So this is a distribution of the split that people are having, where 100 is 100 to EPD and 0 is 100 to PAQI. And prior to the intervention, most people had not so strong of preference between these two sources, where most people are splitting 50-50. But after the intervention, what we saw was that people who were assigned to the EPD treatment, in which people are sort of being shown that this forecast came using data from EPD, they predominantly prefer the EPD source by about, I think, 75 to 25 on average, and the complete opposite for folks who are assigned the PAQI treatment. And at the same time, so people generally have similar willingness to pay for different sources coming from, the two sources that we make salient on average. But one thing that we find is that people have slightly people believe that the government source are slightly less accurate, and we can talk in more detail about exactly how we measure them offline as well. So that's one thing that we sort of noticed, that people may have residual sort of fixed ideas about the quality of information sources depending on the labels that we attach to them. So this is an encouraging empirical result in a sense that people have very high willingness to pay, and this is not DHA. This is a working class neighborhood in northeast Lahore. This is encouraging, and folks in these areas at baseline generally don't have any access to information. I think about 5 to 10% of people report themselves that they've been exposed to or have had access to air quality readings. I think primarily through EPD. But one thing that I thought was a little bit counter to our prior is that people don't really exhibit strong preferences for sources before they receive any of these text messages. But once they do, they're kind of forming preferences for the source that they're being provided. And I think this is sort of conditional on the fact that we're able to consistently provide this information on a daily basis, and these forecasts are generally accurate. So as long as we can sort of provide high quality and reliable information, people would prefer them. This is not particularly controversial, but I think it's reassuring to see that people are not sort of really strongly sticking to their strongly held preferences or priors about which source they like and they prefer. So next step is that we have this tool. How do we scale it up to make it accessible to a much larger public? Mohammed will talk right after this about how he went about providing this service, and Isra can talk a little bit more as well. But this is a fairly high-cost intervention we're doing, sending SMSs through a private service that would let us mass text people. So we want to have conversations about how to basically scale this up at low cost. Another component that we didn't really talk about in my presentation that we have been thinking about is, we're providing information to folks who did not previously have access to information, at least very easily. Do they then form preferences about, how they would like their local authorities or the governments to act? Does this sort of feed into the question about collective action? That's something that we could discuss as well. And lastly, take up on adaptation behaviors such as wearing masks, air purifiers, and other forms of avoidance. That's something that Samvel has talked about regarding to our previous project. So please feel free to ask us about that as well. So thanks, and I'll pass off the baton to Mohammed.
Session, and he leads the survey wing at Ideas. And it's been great working with them. They're really pioneered the use of using tablets to collect real-time information, and have really built this capacity to do primary research work, especially field experiments for researchers in the country. So Mohammed, over to you.
Thank you. That was actually my first slide. The survey wing at Ideas, and we do data collection for in-house projects at Ideas, and we also take up projects of data collection for other clients, and Shutara is one of them. We worked on quite a few projects that are related to environment. We've worked with Saval, we're working with Shutara, we're working with Samreen Malik and Fatih Nadeem. And I'm here to present about some field challenges that we faced during this project. A little bit background on the sampling. So the researchers wanted us to do this data collection in low income and high population density neighborhoods. So we selected NA 123 and NA 124, but these are from the old delimitations, which is delimitations that were used in 2013 elections. So this is Bagbanpura area, Harbanspura, Shalimar Garden, and that area. So blue pins are the main sample, and the red pins are the replacement sample. If the pin, because the pins are they're dropped randomly, so if the pin drops in a field, in river, or cantonment area, we have to sort of replace it. So very briefly, the field challenges that we faced were, one was the question of the prioritization of the issues. When we went to the respondent, the first question that was asked was, why are you doing any survey or any kind of experiment on air quality when there are problems like corruption, political issues, water sanitation, and other things? Like, they did not take it as a serious issue initially when we went to them, and I'm talking strictly about when we contacted them for the first time in the baseline. Then the second issue that we faced was the explanation of air quality reading. It's not like you tell them about a temperature like 35 degrees Celsius or higher is something that is hot. You have to explain them what PM 2.5 means, what's moderately sensitive, sensitive from unhealthy for sensitive groups, what's unhealthy for other groups, and all of that discussion had to go on with them. And we had to do quite a bit of a training for our enumerators as well, because they were also new in this area, so we had to tell them and explain them a lot what PM 2.5 means. And Shatara and Isra have been, like, they have helped us a lot, that they've been part of the trainings as well. Then we have to explain them about the intervention message, what it means, what the forecast would look like, and why is it important, and why are we actually providing it to them. And then the other issue that we faced was that they had no sort of idea about PAQI and EPD. So we had to tell them, like, the differentiation, like we were telling them the PAQI is a private sector and EPD is actually our government department, and you would get these messages, and some of them would be from EPD and some of them would be PAQI. So the problem that we faced when we were talking to these respondents was mainly that everything was the first time they were getting this information. Then, of course, when Shutara makes a survey or Saval makes a survey, it has to have some sort of extra complications. So we had to explain these experiments as well, which are not which are a little complicated for even the enumerators or the responders to understand. So we had to make sure that they understand the BDM and the forecasting well. One of the main challenges was securing correct numbers. That's true for actually every project that we do. It was very much important for us because, one, we had to follow up with these respondents and go back to them. And secondly, the SMS intervention had to be done on these numbers. So in order to make sure that we were securing correct numbers, we incentivized them that we would give you an easy load of a certain amount, so they would give us their correct numbers. The last field challenge that I've mentioned over here is about the contact frequency. We faced this when we went back to them in the end line, and they mentioned that you've been hogging up a lot of our time and you've been contacting us quite a few times. The SMS has been daily, and some of them complained that they did not give the number so that we would come back to them and interview them again. So that's sort of true for all the field work that we do. But the takeaways that I mentioned over here are that when we went back to the end line, there was an appreciation on sending air quality information text. People were really happy that we've been sending. There've been quite a few people who've said that the SMS was coming daily and it sort of disturbed them, but most of the people were very happy. So even there's a question about it. 84% of the people were satisfied, 11% were neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, and 5% were dissatisfied about the information text. Actually, there were people who mentioned that they wanted to, they have actually changed their routine a bit. Like they said, I can't do anything about the office or sending my child to school, but I have control when I send my kid to play outside, or I have control for when I go out and meet my friends. And I actually look forward to what the text prediction will be, so I can plan my day accordingly. So we've seen quite a few instances where people have told us about that. And also the EPD pamphlet that we gave for complaint registration, we actually gave these people a choice that if they want to take this or not, and there was an 84% uptake where they received the pamphlet and said that they would use the number to actually register a complaint if they had one. So that's it from my side. If it's not good. That's
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Done?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll open up the floor now for a collective discussion informed by the presentations that were just made. And if you have any questions for the speakers, you can weave that into your comments and in your discussion points. If you wanna speak, just raise your hand, and I'll call on you. But I would also request that we try to keep our comments brief and as to the point as possible. So the floor is open to general discussion.